Hello friends, welcome or welcome back to my channel. My name is Danny and today we're going to look at my February wrap-up. If you've watched my videos within the past year, you know that I don't do typical wrap-ups. Normally, I like to do high and low videos, and I still want to get back to that. However, January and February were both readathon months, and so I tended to talk about those books throughout the month with my subscribers, on comments, on sprints, and so I feel like doing a high and low for January and February is just going to be me repeating a lot of things. But I still wanted to talk about several of the books that I haven't gotten to talk about, and maybe sprinkle in some of the ones that I did just in case you missed that comment, or those comments, that talk that we've had throughout the month. And so I decided to do something a little bit different this month and do a superlatives edition of my February wrap-up. Before we get to the superlatives, I'll give you guys a little bit of my stats for the month. So I read 13 books in the month of February. I did participate in Battle of the Girl Bands. 12 of those books went to my Battle of the Girl Bands. One of them was a carryover from January that was for TBR-a-thon, which I could have counted it in Battle of the Girl Bands, but I didn't. So anyway, my average number of pages was 317. Yeah, 317. Sorry, I have my notes down here. Which is a little low, which is why in March I'm kind of hitting the chunky reads harder than I normally would. And not saying that 317 is a bad number by any means, but I know that I enjoy larger books, and so that's one of the reasons that in March I'm reading bigger books. And my average rating was a 3.77. I had 2 5-star reads, 7 4-star reads. Out of those 7, I had 3 4.5s, 3 4.25s, and 1 just random or regular 4-star. I had 1 3-star, 2 2-stars, and out of the 2 stars I had a 2 and a 2.5, and then I had 1 1-star, which was a 1.5. I do think that's a pretty good reading month. 4 out of the 13 were below a 3-star or below, and I think that is because I do believe that readathons get me a little bit out of my comfort zone as far as I'm not picking up books that I know are going to be, I don't want to say enjoyed, but books that I'm going to love, which I do think has given me a couple of surprises that we're going to talk about, but it also just introduces me to some books that were not my taste, and hence the lower ratings. So I'm not going to talk about all 13 books here. I am just going to talk about the ones that I am picking out with the superlatives, and we are going to start with the reason, the culminating book, the whole point behind this video, the reason I really wanted to share with you guys my February wrap-up, and that is the most likely book to be reread, and that is My Murder. This is a book I did not get a chance to talk about this month on any of my videos because I did read it towards the end of the month and it didn't really fit in with any of the videos that went up. It's not horror, it's like mystery thriller-esque, and so it didn't go in my most recent horror video, which has a lot of the books that I read in the month of February in it. So I want to give you guys I want to talk to you guys about this. And if you want me to talk more, maybe upon reread, I can do like a really deep dive detailed review because I freaking love this book. It was a 5-star read. It was definitely unexpected. I got this recommendation from Michaela over at Michaela Reads, and I believe, if I remember correctly, Michaela put it on one of her videos about books that essentially, like weird books that are, I don't want to say misunderstood because that sounds pretentious, but like a lot of people do not like them. They are out of the norm of the genre and a lot of people tend to not enjoy them. I love this. You follow a main character whose name I'm not going to remember, or will be surprised. And she is a victim of a serial killer. She has been murdered, and they live in a society where cloning is a thing, and that cloning has been kind of perfected, and society in general has decided to bring her back. And when you are brought back as a clone, you are brought back with all of your past memories. You understand like your life up to like a week prior to your death. And she is brought back with a whole bunch of women who were also killed by this serial killer. And they are in like a survival group, even though none of them really survived. And so there's a whole bunch of different components to this book. There is the survival group themselves, so you get to meet all of these ladies who have had this traumatic experience, who do not remember the traumatic experience because, like I said, they don't remember about a week prior to their death, but have been told by their families and society, and I'm sure that they could look up a whole bunch of stuff online to figure out what exactly happened to them. And so you have this group that is led by a member of the... I don't even know what they call it, but the people who decide who gets cloned. There is a like social worker who works with the people they bring back to try and make sure that they acclimate back into society well. You also get to follow our main character, one of the victims, and her family. And she has a 9-month-old baby. She's married, and she has this really intriguing job where she is essentially emotional support for random people, but they never actually have contact. It's like a virtual therapy, and they can put you in kind of any room that you want, and she can look like anyone you want or anyone that she needs to look like. And the therapy can be that you sit and talk. The therapy can be that she hugs you. She is essentially just there to comfort you, and that is her job. And so you also have her reacclimating to this work environment where she is comforting other people, even though she has had this really traumatic experience. And then you have her and her family and her story itself and her inner monologue on being a clone and what that means, and is she still the same person? And this thought process that I just found really intriguing to read about, as far as like she talked about in what point in time not being able to see one of the scars that she got as a child, and how that kind of freaked her out because she was so used to this scar being on her leg and she can remember it happening, but her skin is perfect because it's not the same body. She talks about the fact that she's given birth to her child, but she hasn't. Like her body, the body that she is now in, did not give birth to her child. And so she goes through kind of this emotional trauma of, am I still my child's mother? And I just really liked all of the components. There is also a mystery component that I am not going to tell you what it is because you don't know in the beginning of the book. And one of the things I really enjoyed about this, but I do think that there is a reason why an audience would not like this book, and that is I think that certain things happen throughout this story that made me question that I read the original storyline incorrectly. And I had to go back and reread chapters and be like, did I read that correct? I thought this is what happened, and now we're saying this is what happened. And I think that some people would be put off by that because it does play with your mind. And to really understand, I didn't mind because I was having a good time. So I went back and reread whole chapters just to make sure I understood what we originally knew and now what we're saying now. And which one's true, I don't know. I really enjoyed this. I would caution those of you who do find it intriguing, go into it understanding that it is a book that is not enjoyed by a lot of people, but I just thought it was fantastic. Next, I have Most Surprising Read, and this is Maeve Fly. So I did an entire vlog on Maeve Fly, so I'm not going to sit here and tell you all about it. If you want to check out that vlog, I will link it in the cards for you guys, as well as down in the description. If you are interested in a deep dive, I do spoilers and non-spoilers in that vlog. It's a 30-minute vlog just on the singular book. I will just give you guys a little synopsis on Maeve Fly in case you're interested. It is a horror novel about a girl named Maeve Fly who works at Disneyland. And Maeve Fly is currently taking care of her terminally ill grandmother, who is kind of in a coma, for like a medically induced coma. And she has a at-home healthcare worker that is taking care of her, but she's dealing with the stresses of that, along with working at Disneyland. And you get, in the very beginning, some flashbacks to when Maeve Fly first gets introduced to Disneyland and to LA in general. And you very quickly realize that Maeve Fly is a dark human being and that she really enjoys Disneyland, but maybe not for the reasons that you would think. There is some very dark things that happen here. I don't want to give too much away. Just keep in mind, there are definitely triggers that you should look up for this, specifically torture on page. If you guys are not wanting to see that, it is a very gruesome story. It's very vivid, but I had a really good time. It was very silly to pair horror with Disneyland, and I really enjoyed the setting and I got pulled into the story because of the cartooniness of Disneyland and this really crazy fever dream like things that happen with Maeve Fly. Next is the most thought-provoking, and this is my nonfiction for the month, which is The Hidden Life of Trees. I've talked about this a little bit on my channel. I did rate this 5 stars. This is a book that talks about how trees communicate with one another, how they live in ancient forests, and how they literally live in a community and help each other survive, how they have an understanding of the weather and weather patterns, how they have triggering systems to warn each other of danger that's happening around them. And it was just a very thoughtful and well put together nonfiction book. It did not feel like a nonfiction book. It felt like a storybook that you were just reading about the forest. A lot of the things that they talk about in this book sound fake. And so it's really interesting to learn about nature and how our environment around us survive. The most atmospheric read for this month goes to A Djinn Waits 100 Years. This book was on my recent horror reads, which Maeve Fly is also on that one as well, along with maybe another book on this list too. So if you want to check out horror reads that I've read in recent months, that might be a good video for you guys to check out. A Djinn Waits 100 Years. I will say that I'm giving it the most atmospheric vibe because of certain scenes in the book. So I won't say that the entire book is absolutely atmospheric, but there are just certain scenes and certain things that happen in the book that are so crazy to think about and just had my jaw dropping that I couldn't not give it this award. This book follows a daughter and father duo whose mother has just recently passed away. And there is some grieving going on, and they end up moving to this mansion that has been turned into like an apartment complex. And it is haunted. There are a lot of people who have decided not to live in this apartment complex because weird things have happened. The water is odd. There are sounds that happen. There's just something off about the building, and people know, and so people come, move in, and then they move right back out. And the father has decided to relocate him and his daughter to this location. And you get to see the relationship between father and daughter, but you also get the history between daughter and mother. And when I say that this book is about grief, it's not necessarily about grieving a good person. It's just about grief. And I'm not going to say more than that. There are many facets in this book of grieving and letting go and letting your past control you or push you to certain things. And while this is fantasy horror, I will say that it is very light on both, on fantasy and horror. The Djinn is part of the book, and that is the atmospheric piece in the house. I think that the mansion that they move into, the creepy sounds and certain scenes, I just think are described very well and pull you in. There's a specific scene, and I talked about this in the recent horror reads, where she's digging through essentially the trash or remnants that people have left in this mansion, in this passageway. And this passageway is just filled with the past of all of these people. And she reaches in for a doorknob that is kind of buried behind this, and the house shudders and kind of holds its breath. It holds its breath. And that's just kind of a description of why I think this book is very atmospheric. I really enjoyed this, but I definitely think that it's going to be hard for this book to reach the audience that it's meant for, because it's not scary, and I'm having a hard time describing to you exactly what the purpose of this story was. It's really just about letting go and kind of getting to know yourself through grief. The most cozy read for this month was Emily Wilde's Map of the Otherlands. This is Emily Wilde 2, and I was super excited to read this with Leandra, and this book did not disappoint. I ended up rating this 4.5 stars. I did not like this as much as the first one, but I will say I enjoyed the companions of this book much more than the first one. Not that the companions in the first one weren't great, but I think that we got to see a little bit more of them in this book, and got some new additions as well that I really enjoyed. If you haven't heard of Emily Wilde's, I won't describe the plot of this book because spoilers, but the first book you follow Emily Wilde, who is a scientist who is studying fairies and trying to create an encyclopedia for the scientific community. And she gets herself into a little bit of a pickle, goes to a Nordic town, I believe, and it's very secluded, but there are definitely some fae that live among the area, and they are causing some of the town folks some problems, and she gets involved. This book is very cozy, even though there are some very high stakes within it, and I've had a lot of fun with the series, and I can't wait for the third. Next, the most likely to make you question everything is Sundial. This is another one I recently talked about in that recent horror reads, and this you follow a family of 4, and there are 2 daughters and a father and a mother. There is some odd things going on with the eldest daughter, and she just isn't a quote-unquote normal child, and she's very quiet, very reserved, and there's something that happens at the very beginning of the book that puts one of the children in danger. And so the mother decides to pick up one of the daughters and go to Sundial, which is her family's estate out in the desert, which has some history. And you learn about the history, you learn about why it's kind of a place that she has left, and why there are some odd buildings in the area that she's traveling to. You learn about her past with her sister, who is no longer with them, and you also learn about what exactly happened with her daughters along the way, which doesn't sound like much of a book, but this book is crazy. There are so many hints and details in the book that I know I missed. I need to go back and reread this as well. So this one also could have been the one that I'm most likely to reread. I'm going to reread My Murders first, because that book was absolutely phenomenal. And I really did like Sundial, but there were so many things that I went down a Reddit rabbit hole after I read this, because you don't really know, like, you know something dark is happening with the girls, but you don't know why or what. And there's, in the history behind it, there's some hints throughout the book about the history that don't add up, and oh my gosh, this book just threw me for a loop. But I really enjoyed it, and I really do want to read it again so I can try and pick apart the pieces that I know I missed. Now on to the 2 negative superlatives that I have for this month. The first is the most forgettable, and for this I put Suburban Hell, which is another book on the most recent horror reads that I had. I gave this a 2-star, so it wasn't great in general as far as storyline goes, but I do already find myself forgetting some of the things that I've read, which says a lot, because I buddy read this with Nell and Leandra, and we talked about it extensively, and there are still some things that I can't really remember what exactly happens and why. You follow a group of ladies, there are 4 women, I believe, and they all live in a suburb. They decide to build a she shed on one of their properties, and building the she shed essentially unleashes a demonic force, and yeah, bad things ensue. So I really thought that this book could have done so much better with its premise, because I think it's a really fun premise, and I did have a fun time with Nell and Leandra talking about this book, but I was just very underwhelmed by the inconsistencies in the story and the reasoning behind a lot of things, and because of the fact that it's so, I don't know, I feel myself already forgetting about it, and I think that it deserves the title of most forgettable for this month. The last superlative I have is the most disappointing read, and this is actually not my lowest rated book for this month, but I do think it's my most disappointing, and that is The River Enchanted, or A River Enchanted, whichever one it is. This is a book that I was hesitant to pick up. It's a book that's been on my TBR for a really long time, but I had kind of convinced myself that I wasn't going to like it, and I was right. I rated this 2.25 stars. I think that this book is beautifully written. I think that the characters are interesting, and the story has a lot going for it, but it focuses on the things I don't want it to focus on, and it was a little disappointing as far as the culmination. Not because I hated the ending, or that I hated the twist that happens at the end, or that I think it shouldn't have happened, but because I think that some of the plot and the reasoning behind things that were happening throughout the entire book were kind of dumb, in my opinion. So if you haven't heard of this book, you follow a main character. Once again, I am not going to remember his name. He has been shipped off when he's younger, and you get his past throughout. Like you don't get like time jumps by any means, but you get the information about his past throughout the book. So when he is younger, he is shipped off to the mainland away from the island of Cadence, and he goes to university and studies music and becomes a bard, essentially. And he is called back to the island because there are girls that are going missing on the island, and the island, the people who are in charge of like his clan think that he might be able to help. And so he is drawn back. On this island, there is a magic. They can enchant weapons, which you cannot get anywhere else in the world. There is some of that magic has to do with his music, and the mystery ensues. And so you chase this mystery of the missing girls. And that is the piece, the mystery of the missing girls, and the thing that actually, the reasoning behind it, I think is dumb. What actually is happening and the reason behind it, I think is dumb. I don't think that, I just think that it could have been done better. I also think that the fairies in the book are, I don't want to give that away, so maybe I won't say that. There is some storyline with the fae that I was a little disappointed that they weren't more ingrained in the story. I also was the same with the magic system. I wanted to know more about the magic. I wanted to know how things worked, why it worked, and that didn't really happen. There were also some things in the story, there were legends that were used that it seemed very convenient that people didn't know about one moment, but then all of a sudden someone has an epiphany and it's like, oh yeah, the legend that, everyone knows that. And I'm like, well, 2 pages ago we didn't know that. Anyway, I was very disappointed by this read. I will not be continuing with the series, but I am glad I finally picked it up, so at least I know that this type of story is just not for me. So those are some of the books that I read in February. What have you guys been reading? What was your favorite book from this month? I would love to chat with you guys in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you have a lovely evening, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.